He nodded toward her armful of papers. "Surely you're not going to carry all that stuff with you?" he questioned. "Yes, I am, Mr. Barton," drawled Eve Edgarton, scarcely above a whisper. Worriedly he pointed to her stirrups. "But Great Scott, Miss Edgarton!" he protested. "Surely you're not reckless enough to ride like that? Just guiding with your feet?" "I always do, Mr. Barton," sing-songed the girl monotonously. "But the extra horse?" cried Barton. With a sudden little chuckle of relief he pointed to the chunky gray. There was a side saddle on the chunky gray. "Who's going with us?" Almost insolently little Eve Edgarton narrowed her sleepy eyes. "I always take an extra horse with me, Mr. Barton. Thank you." She yawned with the faintest possible tinge of asperity. "Oh!" stammered Barton quite helplessly. "Oh!" Heavily as he spoke he lifted one foot to his stirrup and swung up into his saddle. Through all his mental misery, through all his physical discomfort, a single lovely thought sustained him. There was only one really good riding road in that vicinity, and it was shady, and thank Heaven it was most inordinately short. But Eve Edgarton falsified the thought before he was half through thinking it. She swung her horse round, reared him to almost a perpendicular height, merged herself like so much fluid khaki into his great, towering, threatening neck, reacted almost instantly to her own balance again, and went plunging off toward the wild, rough, untraveled foothills and certain destruction, any unbiased onlooker would have been free to affirm. Snortingly the chunky gray went tearing after her. A trifle sulkily Barton's roan took up the chase. Shade? Oh, ye gods! If Eve Edgarton knew shade when she saw it, she certainly gave no possible sign of such intelligence. Wherever the galloping grass-grown road hesitated between green-roofed forest and devastated woodlot, she chose the devastated woodlot. Wherever the trotting, treacherous pasture faltered between hobbly rock-strewn glare and soft, lush-carpeted spots of shade, she chose the hobbly, rock-strewn glare. On and on and on, till dust turned sweat, and sweat turned dust again. On and on and on. With the riderless gray thudding madly after her, and Barton's sulky roan balking frenziedly at each new swerve and turn. It must have been almost 3 miles before Barton quite overtook her. Then in the scudding transitory shadow of a growly thundercloud she reined in suddenly, waited patiently till Barton's panting horse was nose and nose with hers, and then pushing her slouch hat back from her low curl-fringed forehead, jogged listlessly along beside him with her pale olive face turned inquiringly to his drenched, beet-colored visage. "What was it that you wanted me to do for you, Mr. Barton?" she asked with a laborious sort of courtesy. "Are you writing a book of something that you wanted me to help you about? Is that it? Is that what Father meant?" "Am I writing a book?" gasped Barton. Desperately he began to mop his forehead. "Writing a book? Am I writing a book? Heaven forbid!" "What are you doing?" persisted the girl bluntly. "What am I doing?" repeated Barton. "Why, riding with you. Trying to ride with you," he called out grimly as, taking the lead impetuously again, Eve Edgarton's horse shied off at a rabbit and went sidling down a sandbank into a brand new area of rocks and stubble and breast-high blueberry bushes. Barton liked to ride, and he rode fairly well, but he was by no means an equestrian acrobat, and quite apart from the girl's unquestionably disconcerting mannerisms, the foolish, floppity presence of the riderless gray rattled him more than he could possibly account for it. Yet to save his life he could not have told which would seem more childish, to turn back in temper or to follow on in the same. More in helplessness than anything else, he decided to follow on. On and on and on would have described it more adequately. Blacker and blacker the huddling thundercaps spotted across the brilliant sunny sky. Gaspier and gaspier in each lulling tree top, in each hushing bird song, in each drooping grass blade, the whole torrid earth seemed to be sucking in its breath as if it meant never, never to exhale it again. Once more in the midst of a particularly hideous glare, the girl took occasion to rein in and wait for him, turning once more to his flushed, miserable countenance a little face inordinately pale and serene. "If you're not writing a book, what would you like to talk about, Mr. Barton?" she asked conscientiously. "Would you like to talk about peat bog fossils?" "What?" gasped Barton. "Peat bog fossils," repeated the mild little voice. "Are you interested in peat bog fossils? Or would you rather talk about the Mississippi River pearl fisheries? Or do you care more perhaps for politics? Would you like to discuss the relative financial conditions of the South American republics?" Before the expression of blank despair in Barton's face, her own face fell a trifle. "No?" she ventured worriedly. "No? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Barton, but you see, I've never been out before with anybody my own age, so I don't know at all what you would be interested in." "Never been out before with anyone her own age?" gasped Barton to himself. Merciful heavens! What was her own age? There in her little khaki Norfolk and old slouch hat she looked about 15 years old. And a boy at that. Altogether wretchedly he turned and grinned at her. "Miss Edgarton," he said, "believe me, there's not one thing today under God's heaven that doesn't interest me except the weather." "The weather?" mused little Eve Edgarton thoughtfully. Casually as she spoke she glanced down across the horse's lathered sides and up into Barton's crimson face. "The weather? Oh!" she hastened anxiously to affirm. "Oh, yes. The meteorological conditions certainly are interesting this summer. Do you yourself think it's a shifting of the Gulf Stream? Or just a change in the paths of the cyclonic areas of low pressure?" she persisted drearily. "Eh?" gasped Barton. "The weather? Heat was what I meant, Miss Edgarton. Just plain heat. Damned heat was what I meant, if I may be so explicit, Miss Edgarton." "It is hot," conceded Eve apologetically. "In fact," snapped Barton, "I think it's the hottest day I ever knew." "Really?" droned Eve Edgarton. "Really!" snapped Barton. It must have been almost half an hour before anybody spoke again. Then, "Pretty hot, isn't it?" Barton began all over again. "Yes," said Eve Edgarton. "In fact," hissed Barton through clenched teeth, "in fact, I know it's the hottest day I ever knew." "Really?" droned Eve Edgarton. "Really?" choked Barton. Creakily under their hot, chafing saddles the sweltering roans lurched off suddenly through a great snarl of bushes into a fern-shaded spring hole and stood ankle deep in the boggy grass, guzzling noisily at food and drink, with the chunky gray crowding greedily against first one rider and then the other. Quite against all intention, Barton groaned aloud. His sun-scorched eyes seemed fairly shriveling with the glare. His wilted linen collar slopped like a stale poultice around his tortured neck. In his sticky fingers the bridle rein itched like so much poisoned ribbon. Reaching up one small hand to drag the soft flannel collar of her shirt a little farther down from her slim throat, Eve Edgarton rested her chin on her knuckles for an instant and surveyed him plaintively. "Aren't we having an awful time?" she whispered. Even then, if she had looked womanly, girly, even remotely affectedly feminine, Barton would doubtless have floundered.